The desert was vast and unyielding, its horizon stretching into infinity where the sky burned orange and crimson with the last gasps of the day, and Jacob Turner stood on the porch of his lonely cabin, a figure carved by hardship and solitude, his boots planted on the worn boards that creaked beneath his weight, his shoulders broad but slumped with years of carrying silence, his beard bristled with gray that told the story of winters endured in battles with time rather than men, his eyes narrowed against the dying sun, and though outwardly he looked every inch the hardened rancher of the Arizona Territory, a man who had long since learned to rely on no one but himself, inwardly his chest carried an emptiness so heavy it had nearly crushed him, for Jacob had once known laughter in this place, he had once shared this porch with a wife whose smile had softened the edges of every hard day, with the son whose laughter rang like bells in the valley, but the fever had swept through one bitter winter, taking both from him within days, leaving Jacob to bury love beneath the hard earth and rise each morning to the cruel fact that he lived on while they did not, and in the years since he had built his world into a fortress of silence where cattle and chores kept his hands busy but could not fill the long nights, nights where the wind rattled the windows like a reminder that he was utterly, unforgivably alone, and it was in this silence, in this ritual of solitude, that Jacob first saw her, for as he sipped stale water from a tin cup and let his gaze wander to the edges of the corral where the desert brush cluttered the land, a shadow moved, small and uncertain, too slight to be a coyote, too clumsy to be one of the wild horses that sometimes skirted near, and Jacob's hand went instinctively for the rifle leaning by the door, his body taut with years of knowing that anything unexpected in this land could mean danger, but he did not raise the weapon yet. He waited, watching with the patience of a man who knew life and death often balanced on a single moment of hesitation, and soon the figure stumbled out into the open, and Jacob's heart, though hardened, faltered in its rhythm, for what emerged was no bandit, no threat, but a girl, a young Apache girl no more than 17, her black hair tangled with dust and twigs, her face streaked with sweat, her buckskin dress torn as if she had been running for miles through thorns and rocks, and her legs wavered beneath her like a foal not yet steady on its feet, her every movement the portrait of exhaustion, and Jacob's instincts screamed danger because to shelter her would invite the wrath of soldiers or neighbors, because the Apache were spoken of with fear and suspicion, because a man could lose everything if accused of harboring only but when she lifted her head and their eyes met, Jacob saw not the enemy settlers spoke of, not the vengeful savage soldiers whispered about, but the girl whose eyes were wide and dark and filled with a loneliness so deep it seemed to spill into him, a loneliness that mirrored his own so perfectly that he felt as though fate itself had dragged her here to hold a mirror before him, and then she spoke, her voice hoarse, cracked by thirst, yet carrying a weight heavier than any weapon. She whispered, "I don't want to be alone," and in that instant Jacob Turner, who had endured years of nights whispering the same words into the dark only to hear them swallowed by silence, felt those 6 words pierce through every wall he had built, felt them strike deeper than grief had ever managed, and though logic screamed at him to turn her away, to protect his land and his fragile peace, though he knew the dangers were real and would come swift if she were discovered here, Jacob did not move to send her back, did not move to close his heart, for in her trembling, in her plea, he saw himself, and when she swayed forward, her legs giving way as if her body could no longer hold the weight of its suffering, Jacob caught her before she struck the dust, and she was light, far too light, her bones frail beneath his rough hands, her skin hot with fever, and without another thought, without a word to the doubts gnawing at him, he lifted her in his arms as though she weighed no more than a child, carried her across the porch, pushed open the cabin door with his boot, and laid her on the narrow cot that had been empty for years, a cot that once held his son, and as he looked down at her, the cabin, which had been nothing but a mausoleum to memory, suddenly felt alive again, felt as though air itself had returned to fill its hollow spaces, and Jacob, swallowing hard, set aside the rifle and went to work, for survival was second nature to him, and he knew this girl, whatever her story, would not last the night without help, so he fetched water from the barrel, dipped the cloth, and pressed it to her burning forehead, boiled water over the fire to cleanse the shallow cuts and scraps that crisscrossed her arms and legs, tore strips from an old shirt to bind her wounds, and all the while she watched him with half-lit eyes, as though she did not quite believe what was happening, as though she feared that at any moment he would send her back into the dark. But Jacob did not. Jacob remained at her side, his gruff silence the only answer he could give to her fear, until at last she whispered again, her voice so faint he nearly missed it, "My family a broken bar, soldiers Cammy a broken bar, I lost them," and she broke into quiet sobs, her small hands covering her face as though ashamed of the weakness, and Jacob, whose heart had not softened for anyone in years, felt something unravel in him, a knot of grief and solitude loosening, and though words never came easy to him, he forced them past his lips, low and rough but steady, "You can stay here. Ain't much, but it's safe," and her sobbing slowed, her hands lowered, her eyes widened with disbelief before softening into the faintest spark of hope, and she nodded once, the movement weak but full of meaning, before her exhaustion claimed her and her eyes fluttered shut, and Jacob sat there long after, staring into the fire, feeling for the first time in years that the silence of the night was not suffocating, that the walls of the cabin no longer pressed in on him like a coffin, for in the corner of the room, breathing softly, was someone who needed him, and though he knew danger would come, knew the world outside his ranch was unforgiving and would not abide this choice, Jacob Turner made his decision there and then. He would face whatever storm was coming, for the girl had given him something he thought long buried, a purpose, and perhaps, the faint echo of companionship.